Hi, I'm Dr. Rudy Cashman, neurosurgeon at Fort Wayne, Indiana. I've been practicing neurosurgery for 40 years, but I'm only 39 years old. What I'm trying to do is be a wellness doctor, and I really work at it pretty heavily. I have many DVDs. I have 9 books in it this year, and I'm trying to get you to live to be 100 and to be of sound mind. So I look at all aspects of wellness. Tonight, we have a very interesting subject. Tonight, we're going to speak about memory, how to keep your memory sharp. And as some people would say, what good is it to be 80, 90 years old if you have a very poor memory? What I would teach you tonight is habits, things to avoid, things that you can do to keep your memory very sharp throughout life. I personally believe, from my experience in all my reading and research, that if a person follows these 25 things or so I'm going to discuss, that indeed you can make it to 100. Indeed, your mind can be very sharp. This is supported in the literature. In my patients, many of them demonstrate that. So this can be very interesting. So let's start this little conversation. Let's have a little bit of fun. And so what is memory? What is memory itself? It's using our 5 senses to gather information, our eyes, our ears, our touch, our taste, then storing it in our brain, then the ability to recall it or retrieving it. This really what memory is. Where is memory located in our brain? Where is it located? I'll tell you where it's actually at as far as research has taken us. It is located in little packages called vesicles that jump across the synapse. The synapse is a space between the end of a nerve called an axon and the receiving part called the dendrite. And there's no electricity jumps across. It's chemicals. It's chemicals. And our memory is stored in these little carriers, very small carriers. They've been demonstrated on an electron microscope. There are about 5,000 molecules in each little carrier. A molecule is the smallest substance of something that still has all the chemicals in it to identify that. So the smallest sodium, for example, would be a molecule. The smallest substance of salt would be a molecule. And in that, 5,000 of those are carried in these little carriers. I'm going to show you a picture about that a little bit and jump across to the next nerve to send the message. What are our memories? I mean, they represent our intelligence, our personality, our humanity. Without memory, there isn't much left of us. It's our currency. It's our primary resource. Our memory is our primary resource. What is it all about, really? It's about our brain cells and synapses. Synapses, now we talked about, is the area where we jump from one nerve to the next. How many synapses do we have in our body? Trillions. Trillions. We have more synapses in each individual brain than there are stars in the universe. Would you believe it? It's absolutely true. It is unbelievable. If you fire your nerves, they're more likely to be wired in memory. In other words, you got to use it or lose it. You've heard that term before. You fire our neurons, you use our brain, and most likely it'll be wired in your brain and keep there for a long period of time. And so if you repeat something you're trying to remember many times, you're much more likely to encode it in this computer, your brain. Let's talk about memory types. This is very interesting. This is very interesting. What types of memories do we have? We have short-term memory, things that you can remember just for a short period of time. Incidentally, about 90% of the things that you hear, you forget about in minutes. We don't convert that much to long-term memory. They've renamed short-term memory now. It's called immediate and working memory. Immediate is something that you hear and you remember it for a few minutes, a few seconds, and then it is moved into working memory. Working memory is the ability to drive a car, to do something. Usually, actually, it's something that you have to think about. Some activity you're carrying out in the house, that's working memory. So short-term memory now is a combination of immediate, that's the thing you immediately remembered. You convert it to working memory to do the things that are around you. And then Working memory is your daily activities around us. That's a working memory. Now, if working memory is processed and rehearsed, repeated, for example, it converts to long-term memory. We don't store everything in long-term memory, just some things. What's amnesia? You hear about amnesia. Amnesia is when there's damage to both temporal lobes, for example, and you lose your memory after an accident, for example. That's amnesia. It can recover. It may not recover. Now here's I'd like you to see this illustration here, which is very interesting. And it shows a axon and the red dots that you see in there. See those little red dots right there? Those are the vesicles that carry our memory. They go right across the synapse. This is a synapse, a space, and they go through these doors to the next nerve. So our memories really are these vesicles. Very interesting. Let's talk about long-term memory a minute. What types of long-term memory do we have? We have declarative memory. We have declarative memory and non-declarative memory. Non-declarative memory is like playing tennis or playing golf, something you've practiced so often, or even like driving a car so often that you don't think at all. It's just automatic. It's pretty much automatic. That is called non-declarative memory. That's also called explicit. It's called implicit memory. So non-declarative and implicit memory are really the same thing. The things you can do automatically, you can remember for a long time, you don't have to think. Declarative memory and explicit memory are events like a graduation you went to, a wedding you went to years and years ago, high school activities, the ball game, the tennis match, those things you remember. Those are called declarative or explicit memory. So memory is in your molecules, and I demonstrate to you those little red dots here that we talked about right here. That indeed is your memory. So let's talk about the secret of enhancing your brain. Let's talk a little bit about anatomy here. Very interesting. How many brain cells does the normal person have? About 100 billion. Just think of the number. 100 billion brain cells. But you have about 100 trillion synapses. Remember what I said, your memory is in your synapses. So to increase your synapses throughout life is very important. And those synapses produce those memory vesicles with molecules in them. That's where your memory is stored. You lose about 10 to 50% of the brain cells by age 65. So it's not that many. We're not losing half a brain by age 65 unless you drink a lot of alcohol, you have toxic habits. Sure, that could happen. But a normal person loses only 10 to 15% of the brain cells by age 65. About 1% have advanced dementia by age 65. About 1% of the people have terrible memory loss by age 65. Many, though, it's not natural. It's caused by diseases and habits that they have. And we're going to talk about preventing those and as being very important. Now, here's good news for all of us. Neuroplasticity. This term, neuroplasticity, is a new term, and it's the ability of the brain to grow and learn. They proved that just a few years ago, just in the last 10 years. We did not realize you could grow new brain cells, you could develop new connections. We thought it was just a downhill course. Incorrect, totally incorrect. So the brain is highly dynamic and constantly reorganizing at any age. At any age. Neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. Neurogenesis means growing new brain cells. We can indeed grow new brain cells through proper habits, through exercise, and through learning. You can grow new cells, and that's called neuroplasticity. The birth of the nerve cells then will be called neurogenesis. Neuroplasticity is the lifelong capacity of the brain to change. Wow. Throughout life, our brain can change and improve ourselves. Absolutely true. This is great news. Not many people are aware of it. And the ability to revive itself in response to a stimulus of learning and experience. That becomes very important, how active our brain is. Very interesting. World Brain Gym. Use each day as an opportunity to grow your brain. Take advantage of every activity. And this illustration we have is very interesting. that again shows an axon on top, and then we see what's called amyloid plaque. Amyloid plaque is something that we developed, some people from head injuries, and it is something that we see more of as we get older. For example, it is thought that advanced dementia, you have a lot of amyloid plaques and fibrillary tangles, for example, but this is an illustration where you see at the synapse right here, I'm going to surround it, that's the amyloid. That makes this area sticky, and the vesicles can't go across there. So what happens? You lose your memory. You lose your memory. Now let's continue with the World Brain Gym. Vary your cognitive, that's ability to learn, a workout routine, all types of activities. I mean, do everything you think of, from art to music to playing the piano to reading, attending lectures, taking piano lessons, language lessons. All these cognitive activities will help grow your neurocells and your neurotransmitters. You can save your brain. They have found that educated people, people with college educations, get less advanced dementia. People who are taking courses through life, go to college at a later time, or constantly reading books, or doing puzzles all the time, avoid dementia at a much higher rate than normal people. Some still get it, but it's a much lower rate. So education is very important. Why? It builds more of those molecules, those memory molecules, more neurotransmitters. And that's protection of your brain against memory loss and dementia, which I'm trying to get you to avoid. Take up other hobbies, art, gardening, reading, music. New hobbies are very good. I'll tell you a good one. Don't retire. Not a good idea. You got to keep a purpose in life. You got to be doing something. People who don't do that, their memory loss increases tremendously. But we'll discuss this many more times in this lecture. Brain cell loss in general doubles every 5 years after age 65. Like you'll have 1% Alzheimer's disease at 65, and in the next 5 years it will have doubled. But that'll really mean dementia. We'll discuss Alzheimer's disease a little more after a little bit, because some pretty good thoughts on that. So we do have some memory loss as we get older, but it's not that much. It's really not that much. Now, what type of memory loss do we talk about over the years, like starting at age 40? First, we talk about age-associated memory loss, AAMI, age-associated. So we know that most people start losing a few words as getting the day older. But I'm going to tell you, though, in a little bit, is that can be largely avoided if you follow the principles of what I'm going to discuss, the longevity mind-body index recommendations, how to avoid that. The next thing to worry about is mild cognitive impairment, CMI. If it gets a little more advanced than age-associated memory loss, then we call it CMI. But that's a lot of debate about that, but that's a little more advanced of it. Now, a real advanced case of memory loss, we could call it advanced dementia. Some would call it Alzheimer's disease. But I don't like the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. I'm going to tell you the reasons for it here in a little bit. And so if age-associated memory loss, CMI, the mild cognitive impairment, and then advanced dementia. And we all have seen cases of that in our families and around. So let's talk about the secrets of enhancing your brain. Let's get back to that a little bit, what to do. 90% who think they have dementia do not. They have some age-associated memory loss, and they think they have dementia coming along. Totally incorrect. Totally incorrect. Depression many times is the case. Many times the case. Depression is a big problem and very common. And if you look at this diagram on the left, there, for example, I show some axons and dendrites, and you see very few neurotransmitters. The green are the neurotransmitters, and you see very few. That would be a good demonstration, really, of advanced dementia. Very few neurotransmitters. Here are the axons, the long things, and these are the dendrites. And let me talk a little bit about what I read a book a few months ago, and I happen to totally agree with it. One of the PhD I work with, psychologist in my group, he happens to agree with my thoughts on this. I read a book by Peter Whitehouse called The Mythology, you won't believe this, of Alzheimer's disease. He thinks it's a myth. I think he's got a point. After talking to one of my associates, Dr. Ron Williams, PhD, he's reading the book, and he says, his 20 years of experience, he often wondered if that's not the case. He said he wished he had written that book. So I'm writing a book on it, frankly. And because a lot of these patients who have a little bit of memory loss don't have any trouble at all. You go see the doctor, they get a test, a memory test, and they say, well, you have dementia. you hear the beginning of Alzheimer's disease. But what's happening is these people are living into the role by their friends, their relatives, their doctor. They're given pills, become depressed, they retreat. They don't go out socially anymore because you gave them this horrible term. What I'm trying to say is we got to find a better language. On a pathological basis, Dr. Whitehouse says, I totally agree, there is no clear-cut test, there's no clear-cut at autopsy even, that they can say for certain, 100%, that you have Alzheimer's disease. Those amyloid bodies, the neurofibrillary tangles that we get from getting older are found in some people. They have no symptoms whatsoever. So you'd have called them Alzheimer's when they had no symptoms whatsoever. That's not true. It's not like a blood test. Your blood sugar is 800, you're diabetic. But there's no tests like that for Alzheimer's disease. Certainly we know the patients that exist have advanced dementia. What Dr. Whitehouse is saying, and I'm saying, that we should be gentle with the words in the beginning and not apply to them what I call the nocebo, the negative talk. Because I see this quite commonly as we destroy the individual. We destroy the individual. And what Dr. Whitehouse is also saying, these drug companies, the pharmaceutical companies, which he knows a lot about because he did his original research on 2 of the 5 drugs that people use for Alzheimer's disease. He says they don't work. He says it right in his book. So they don't work. So it's partly a pharma creation and partly a creation of the research people. Alzheimer's departments, Alzheimer's units, all this stuff, when really it's a dementia problem. But what's happened is a lot of money came for funding, and it's an industry, like the industrial complex for war or whatever. And a very interesting concept. That's Dr. Whitehouse opinion. He knows a lot more than I do. He did the original research. I read his book 3 times. I happen to agree with that. But let's go on here. So they're living into the role. We tell them you get a memory loss, early dementia, and you start living accordingly because that's what we told you. Very interesting. The secret of enhancing your brain. Let's go back to that. Let me give an example. The 3 sisters. I'm talking about my mother and her 2 sisters. My mother died at age 97. She was a very active person, but she never did any reading. She didn't play any cards. She really did not participate in things around her very much. But she was highly loved. She was highly loved. There's no clear she had memory loss starting around age 80 or so. I totally ignored it. Totally ignored it. She came to our Christmas stuff and the Christmas things, and I don't think she recognized anybody at times when she was like 85, 88, but I paid no attention to it. We loved her. We hugged her. She lived with us, and never did we mention dementia or Alzheimer's disease, but I think partly her impaired brain function was lack of using it. Lack of using it. Her sister, essentially just one year younger or so, and who was very active mentally, played cards all the time, did crossword puzzles all the time. Incidentally, puzzles reduce dementia by 40%. You do puzzles every day, the dementia rate goes down 40%. She did all that, traveled all over the world. She was 100% sharp till the day she died. Absolutely. That's interesting, isn't it interesting? Then the other sister married to an alcoholic husband in Germany, beating on her constantly. The husband eventually died from cirrhosis. She became depressed, and someone told her she had dementia. She didn't have dementia. She was depressed. I know she wasn't. But I was such a distance from her, thousands of miles in Germany. But I visited her. I know it was depression. And then the doctor made the mistake. This doctor, Alzheimer originally was from Germany, knew all about the disease, starts telling her she has Alzheimer's disease. And with that, you know what happened? She became more depressed. You know what happened then? She committed suicide. She committed suicide. She was living into the role. That's what I'm talking about. They did the nun study. I think it was even the nuns from Notre Dame, I'm not sure about that, but they did a huge nun study. They died and did autopsies on their brains. They were kind enough to let that happen. They found many totally normal nuns, never had a problem of any kind, and their brains were full of amyloid bodies and neurofibrillary tangles. The amyloid bodies, I showed you the synapse. The neurofibrillary tangles are in the neurocells themselves. They gum up the connecting system in the neurocells and axons. They interfere with the transportation system. Again, no clear proof who had Alzheimer's disease and who didn't, and who had some dementia. That was the nun study, very large. And they found no amyloid bodies and neurofibrillary tangles in a lot of the people. you see the confusion? Why I don't like the diagnosis? And let's look at here. Now, here again, we have an illustration, very interesting. Now, if you look here, the green dots, when we talked about the green dots, you see many more of them. So in this person, they haven't had much memory loss. They have a lot of neurotransmitters, a moderate amount of neurotransmitters. So, and we already talked a little bit about short-term and long-term memory. They affect different parts of the brain. Short-term memory has a lot to do with the hippocampus and the temporal lobes. The hippocampus, it looks like a seahorse. And the reason they found it out, a neurosurgeon took out the hippocampus of a patient named H.M. Years ago. Dr. Scoville, I think, did it, I believe. And he was trying to stop the epileptic attacks on the patient, which he did. But he totally wiped out the patient's recent memory. So now we know where recent memory comes from, where immediate and working memory is located. The patient's long-term memory is fine. He can remember things from high school and way back very well. And he could not lay down new memories. He could not lay down new memories. That's controlled by the hippocampus. Very interesting. And so short-term memory, remember I said, is working memory, immediate memory, and it's located in the hippocampus in the medial aspect of the temporal lobes. Can be greatly affected by head injuries, strokes. But declarative and non-declarative memory, remember the long-term memory, that was still intact in this patient. And there's a special center in the frontal lobe called the basalis of Meinhardt, which is the acetylcholine memory molecule nucleus. Acetylcholine has a lot to do with the memory, and that's the reason that the drugs that we were using as medication for dementia, quote, Alzheimer's disease, so-called Alzheimer's disease, were meant to inhibit the reuptake of acetylcholine. It wanted acetylcholine to stay in the blood and help the brain. But Dr. Whitehouse doesn't think that they work. Maybe a tiny bit for a short period of time. That's the best I give you. Most of the time I notice in his book he says they don't work. Very interesting. So acetylcholine does have a lot to do with memory. Brain reserve, this is very interesting. Remember we talked about education a little bit earlier? And college and adult education improves your brain reserve. It builds your brain reserve. You're much less likely, you can give up more neural cells because you have more neurotransmitters, and you can maintain your mind for many more years. And as you make more and more synapses through learning, through doing activities, then your memory improves. And remember I said you have 100 trillion synapses. Connection, unbelievable. More synapses than stars in the sky. Very interesting. If you do puzzles, you get a 40% decrease in dementia. That's been found. Very interesting. Very interesting point. So what about some memory protection? Just like I have the, over my left side here, I have the Mind Body Index, which is part of my wellness program, where I relate illnesses caused by the mind through stress. You see it over my left shoulder to your right on your screen. I now, and I legally own that name. I thought of this name because it's important for teaching, and for teaching to patients and doctors. I now formed the longevity Mind Body Index. How to live a very long life, live to be 100 and to be intelligent. And I have listed on there about 25 different things that you can do. On the top of that list is proper eating. That's number one by a long shot. On any literature you read, what you eat is important. Fat is destructive to the brain. Patients who are overweight, more likely to have dementia, much more likely to have dementia. Fat makes about 20 nasty chemicals and affects nerve conductions. You have less synapses, and the severe dementia cases go much higher in type 2 diabetics and overweight individual. Very interesting. So eating is very important. Exercise plays a very important part, and that's very interesting. How does exercise do that? Increases the blood flow to the brain, cells, and it sends more nutrients up there. So it does it in that way. Also, exercises increases your BDNF. BDNF is a neurotrophic hormone that makes neurocells grow and makes synapses grow, causes neurosynaptic genesis. So exercise is very important. Exercise you won't believe this, is 4 times more important to the brain than your body. Wow. So exercise becomes critical as you're older. A lot of times exercise in middle age has tremendous effects in older age, but I highly recommend you continue to exercise as you get older. Jack LaLanne's latest book, he's 96, great book to read if you're looking for a book to read on that. He has great recommendations on what type of exercise, etc. College education, very helpful. Remember I said education is protective against dementia because of brain reserve. We talked about that. And it's critical you keep a normal body mass index, your normal BMI, and a normal waist measurement. That's much more likely to assure that you have a sound brain as you get older. Especially if you have type 2 diabetes, get rid of it. I'm writing a book, The Secret of Stopping Type 2 Diabetes in 60 days. I can prove it. I run diet classes. It's a way of eating. It's not a diet. I call it the non-diet, just a way of eating. So you want to get rid of type 2 diabetes because 90% of the time, if you eat the right food, you indeed can. And all you have to do is look at my website. It'll show you how to do it. I have a DVD on it. There'll be a book out on it in 2 months. And I have another book I didn't write, Franklin House, that I found that says on page 78 of his book called The 30-Day Miracle, he describes how to eat exactly what I teach. I know I'm right about this, and it's very important. I'm adamant about it because I see so much type 2 diabetes. I see it every day in my practice. I ran an office this morning. I saw 2 patients with it. I spent a half hour each teaching them about how to stimulate them, motivate them to get rid of the type 2 diabetes. I have diet classes I refer them to, and I teach them. And adult education is very important to protect your brain and develop a purpose in life. Personally, I feel so lucky. I mean, exactly at age 39, more likely like 74, I feel extremely lucky that I have a purpose. Wellness teaching for me provides a great purpose. I still practice full-time neurosurgery, play tennis 3 days a week at least, do yoga, and at the moment I'm writing 4 books. So when doctors tell me they have no time to talk to their patients, I'm going to differ with you. I have the time. I think you get the time. And I find, though, with a purpose in life, I feel bouncy every day. Sure, I get stresses and problems like everybody else does. But don't just retire. It's a mistake. It's going to affect your mind. If you want to be a sound mind years down the line, then get another job. You got to be doing something or volunteer. You got to have a purpose. Good sleep habits are important. I haven't always had real good sleep habits because I'm a very busy guy. But lately I did a DVD on sleep with one of my neurologists, Dr. Kahn, and I learned a lot more about sleep, and that there are good things you can do, like keep the room very dark, turn the TV off, read a book. If you need to, play it on a little bit of music, whatever. Develop a place that you sleep every night the same way. Sleep habits are important. Your memories are set down during sleep. Yeah, those memories that were in immediate and working memory don't get converted to long-term memories till you're asleep. So sleep is very important. You're going to have a better memory. You're going to bounce out of bed a lot better if you had a good night's rest. I really think it's a very important matter. And let's continue on the memory protection plan. Stress control. Steroids are destructive to memory. Steroids, cortisone, destroys your eicosanoids, which are the intel chips of your body, and are very destructive to nerve conduction. So stress control is very important. You can have a lot of memory loss if you're a constantly stressed out individual. You must work on that on my website, Rudy's 20 Prescriptions for Stress Reduction. Have a look at that. And that site has other things in it, and are very important. I think yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong are very good things to do with stress. They exercise you, they stretch you. There's mind control. It also is very relaxing. I think it's a good habit to take on, and I do yoga a couple of times a week. And work, don't retire. Read Jack LaLanne's book, as I mentioned already. I think good book to read. And be a positive thinker. You got to be a positive thinker. You can't turn into a negative thinker and see in the future this, that, and the other is happening to you. And you've got to think positively. On my website, I have a lot of things about positive thinking, PowerPoints about it. And I think Norman Vincent Peale has written wonderful books about it. I treated his assistant minister Thank you, Lord, for sending him to me. And he gave me 21 books of Norman Vincent Peale, autographed by him and his wife, Ruth. I read them all about positive thinking. Great books to read. You can get the PowerPoints off my website. And computer video games have been found to be very stimulative to the brain. I now on my website have Brain Gym. You go to that, and it's very extensive. The mind-body, the longevity index is on there, but I also have on there different computer sites you can go into. The one I particularly love is Pogo. It's free. My God, it take a year to go through Pogo to have every kind of game and video game that you can possibly dream up to play. It'll sharpen your mind. You do that for a half hour a day, you're going to get a sharper mind. And there are all sorts of other things on there too to stimulate your mind. A very good habit. I mean, you got to do something about it. Otherwise, you will not get rid of your AIDS-associated memory loss. But you do these things, your AIDS-associated memory loss may go away. It's in the literature. And video games are considered really the best. I mean, there are many things for sale out there, Illuminati, Darkham, and all these websites are listed. About 20 websites are listed on my website in the Brain Gym, and you can look at all of them. And we can get music on there and all sorts of things, and all for free. And it's all for free. I don't charge anything. If any of those sites charge anything, it isn't me. And like Pogo, totally free. Mind Smarts on there. One word a day. You get a new word every day. Tells you the history of it and the meaning of it. And I look at it every day. And Mindsmith. That's it. Mindsmith is the website. It's free. It's free. So a new word every day is very good. Normal blood pressure is important to maintain a good brain, and you should have good hobbies. Plant a garden, play music, take an instrument lesson, learn a language. Learning a language is very good. Learn a new foreign word every day. Learn Spanish or whatever. Learn a new word every day, and I've done that. It's good. And you see on here actually my longevity mind-body index, and you notice I've made the illustration is quite similar to my mind-body index itself, but this is a longevity mind-body index, and I have all those things on there. Read a book a week, but read a different book, different subject, one a week. It stimulates your mind. Do puzzles, play cards. That'll reduce dementia 30 to 40% chance. Play music, take music lessons, go dancing. I took dancing lessons for 2 years. It really improved my coordination and I think my fluidity of my brain. And genetics play a role in your brain, but I tell you not that much. Not really that much. Maybe 10, 15%. Most of it is the habits that you do. Learn a new language. Learn a new word every day. We talked about that already. Have a large social circle and go to church. To be lonely and by yourself as you're getting day older is destructive. It's destructive to the brain. You'll not live as long. So in these countries where they have a great deal of longevity, like Loma Linda, for example, Costa Rica, some parts of Italy, parts of Japan, Okinawa, Japan, socialization is very important. These elderly people, like in Okinawa, they are totally loved by their family. They're loved. They're worshipped by their families. They fight about who's going to take care of Uncle Joe, who's 102. That's why they live longer. That's why they live longer. Our society needs to change. They need to change. We can't just say you get dementia and dump them in a nursing home. There's going to be so many people nobody can afford it, for one thing, and for another, it destroys the individual. That's the reason I say my mother did so much better. I built an apartment into a house for mother and father to live on. Everybody can afford that, but they had to pay rent somewhere, and I was able to afford it without them paying me rent. But some of us haven't paid you rent, whatever. It's to live with you. It's socialization, and they're going to live longer. And we never brought up the subject of memory loss and dementia or advanced dementia to my mother, ever. We ever mentioned those terms. We just loved her, hugged her, and brought her to our functions. And I tell you, hardly anybody noticed it. Maybe one of my kids brought it up one time, and I just stared at him. Why talk about these things? And we're going to see a lot of that because people are getting older. But don't make them live into the role and isolate them. It's not good. So how does education work? It produces more neurons and synapses. That's how it works. What are better foods for memory? B12, vitamin E, vitamin C. Omega-3 is very important. Walnuts, flaxseed. Omega-3, I think, is very important because it helps build your eicosanoids, your intel chips of your body. Very important. That's the reason you hear so much about 18 carbon compounds, 20 carbon compounds. It's the omega-3 that builds our echinosoids, our good echinosoids, that reduces arthritis, makes brain function better. Folate found in spinach, tomatoes, chickpeas, beans, soybeans. These are all very important. Of course, if you eat the way that I teach in The Secret of the Nun Diet, the book that I wrote, all these things are in there, the type of foods, and you'll be eating this type of foods. And because they have phytochemicals in it, 20,000 phytochemicals, they're enzymes, coenzymes, that make our cells much more fluid, Vitamin E is thought to help memory. There's a little controversy about it, but that's the one you constantly hear about. Whole grain way of eating, green leafy vegetables, sweet potatoes, avocados, all those are good because they have fiber and phytochemicals. The fiber keeps you absorbing everything you're eating, and you can eat more. Now here we have a better memory. Here again, this illustration is very interesting because we see these tremendous number of neurotransmitters that we see on this illustration. What are antioxidants? Why does our brain age to begin with? We think there's a free radical theory of oxidants that do this. Food and oxygen, as it's made into energy, release these chemicals that are missing electrons, and these chemicals, these oxidants, are very damaging to our body. You can stand a certain amount of it, but they cause aging. That's a free radical theory of aging. So you like to eat antioxidants. What are antioxidants? Blueberries, pomegranates, carrots, vegetables. Protect your brain from injuries. Interesting subject. Me being a neurosurgeon, know a lot about it. For example, last night I was on call and I saw a motorcycle accident that they treated the patient, I should say, and he's in intensive care now. One of the hospital, his brain is running out of his ears, and he was not wearing a helmet, and obviously probably he's not going to live. And if he is going to live, he's not going to be living at home. So protect yourself. Bicycles, motorcycles, if you got to ride them, put a helmet on. It becomes extremely important. But again, these are small vehicles. Bicycle, you can have a helmet on, get hit by a car and still die. But it helps to have a helmet on, and especially with the children. I'm not going to say don't anybody ride a bike, but if you ride on an open road, you got to think about what's driving down the road. 10% of people are probably on some medication, some are narcotics, some illegal drugs, and about 30% of the people are probably on some medication that makes them a bit drowsy, and your child's out there riding around. You got to think about where you allow them to ride. Motorcycle accidents, just helmets isn't going to protect them. It helps a lot. But I'll tell you, motorcycles are small vehicles. They get hit by something, guess who's going to be the winner? A deer runs out. Who's going to survive? The guy in a car or the guy on a motorcycle or on a bike? These are things I see every weekend on call. So it's important to protect yourself against injuries. Boxers and soccer players have more brain impairment. Boxers are a lot worse than soccer players, but they've done studies now on soccer players where the dementia rate is significantly higher than normal people. I mean, that makes only sense. You keep on getting hit with this ball in your head, what do you think is going to happen? And boxers have serious problems with dementia. So do football players, much higher rate. And you see it in the paper now about football players, increase dementia. And it tears the long axons. Remember we talked about the neurocell? And it has this axon, which the neurotransmitter has to go down these little tubules, and those axons get torn, and your neurotransmitters decrease, and you're going to lose memory. And also, it's been found as young as age 10 that will develop amyloid bodies and neurofibrillary tangles from head injuries at a very young age. So your child is way out behind the 8 ball for multiple injuries, especially multiple injuries. Do this, multiple concussions, which are not uncommon in people who play sports, but some people get involved in 2 or 3 accidents. So it decreases neurotransmitters, so now you have a smaller brain reserve. You have many more accidents as a small child, and later on you start missing a few words because you don't have the brain reserve you would have had you not had those injuries. Very interesting. So you increase amyloid and neurofibrillary tangles are much more common. Exercise increases memory. We talked about that. Decreases advanced dementia. BDNF, remember I talked about brain-derived neurotrophic factor? That's brought out by exercise. That helps grow your neurocells and your transmitters. With socialization, we mentioned already as being extremely important to keep a brain reserve and get you to live longer and don't retire. We've mentioned that to you before. Let's talk about the aging brain a little bit. We have increased speed of information processing with computer training games, including video games. They increase the speed of your neurotransmitters, increases your neurotransmitters, so quite effective. Art, for example, increases abstract thinking. So to go through a museum, an art museum, a very good thing to do because it also increases your spatial memory and gets you thinking different thoughts and your neurotransmitters build up. So do puzzles, Sudoku, cards. Remember what I said at my Pogo site? Look at on my website and then go to Pogo. My God, they get puzzles and card games and poker and everything you could dream up. You're busy for 6 months. All free to build your brain. So look at Dr. Wellness Brain Gym. That's my brain gym on my Wayne website, cashmanmindbody.com. Go to Brain Gym or Memory, and it pops up. And socialization, go to church, volunteer. We mentioned that. Go dancing. Join the Y in YWCA. I was to Marion, Indiana recently. 26 of the people in Marion, Indiana, you wouldn't believe it, belong to the Y. I could not believe it. I was at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. It was crowded. I loved it. And they do everything physical, but I'm thinking of putting a brain gym into a little empty building they have attached to it. That would be probably the only Y in the country that has that. And I think, remember what I said, exercise the body, but also exercise the brain, because we want to be 100, and we want to be intelligent when we're there. Very important. Take cooking classes. Go to theater and concerts. I think a good thing. Develop a rich social network. Isolation kills. And beware of depression. Remember, depression causes a lot of memory loss. Many times it's confused. You're depressed, and they hand you drugs supposedly that would help dementia when they don't. Exercising, walking in hours is as good as taking a Prozac. A recent study proved that. I'm not saying don't take medication, especially in severe depression, but I'm saying try some exercise. That secretes your own endorphins to make you feel better, build your brain. And watch out for loss of self-esteem, isolation, and you stop exercising because you're depressed. And decreased socialization, remember I said, leads to memory loss. And there's certain tricks you can do if you're having trouble remembering names, for example. You can do tricks like really look at the person, pay attention. The biggest reason for remembering something, you're not paying attention to it. Believe me, I'm a busy person, and I have a habit sometimes of not listening to the name in the first place. Pay attention to it. And then snap. Make a picture of that person in your mind. Snap a picture of it. Visualize it. Visualization, it helps memory a great deal. If you visualize something, but what you're looking at, you're much more likely to remember it. And then connect it to something. Connect it to an event, a day, whatever. So look, snap, and connect. A very good memory thing to remember. Look, snap, and then connect it. If you can visualize something with that person, and I was trying to remember, for example, a little bit unusual name where I eat breakfast at Spiro's, and you know what I visualized, finally remember the darn name, I visualized a spy, dressed up like a spy, rowing down a lake. Spy, row, you got it? So this is a good example of things you can do. And as I mentioned already, cortisone, stress is destructive to the hippocampus, the most important memory structure in your brain. What are some memory tricks? Remember we talked about look, snap, and connect. This is a nice illustration on the left side of this slide. Is very good. Repeat things frequently because that encodes memory. Okay, that encodes it like a computer and puts it back in. Long-term memory really is scattered throughout the brain. Recently I had a patient that had a stroke in the visual part of the brain. They came to see me. You know, the occipital lobe was partly knocked out. They had memory loss. No temporal lobe involved. They had some memory loss. So some of the long-term memory is stored back there. The recent memory is fine. The long-term memory was impaired. And if you can't remember something or things, take notes. That's what Post-it notes are for. That's what Post-it notes are for. Incidentally, I met the man who invented Post-it notes years ago. Yeah, very interesting individual. And visualize, very helpful. Remember we talked about visualize, see a picture. Make a picture in mind, much easier to remember something. And then we talked about a good night's sleep. The Brain Diet, we talked about it already. And The Secret of the Nun Diet is a book that I wrote. I think a very good one to read. It'll get you to eating the right type of foods for a good brain, weight loss, you get rid of type 2 diabetes. Very good book. And in reverse type 2 diabetes, if you have type 2 diabetes, you want to get rid of it. Remember I said you can get rid of it in 30 to 120 days. And I have classes here at the hospital. You can read books about it. My book, remember Franklin House's book, The 30-Day Miracle. He has a website called Diabetes Miracles is his website. 30 years he's been doing this. 30 years Dr. House has been doing this. Page 78. He describes the diet that I teach. He doesn't know me, and I didn't know him. I'm going to bring him to town one day. It's absolute proof that we can do it. You want this monkey off your back, because your last 20 years of life, you're going to be miserable. There are going to be amputations, and you're going to go blind, and heart disease, and strokes, and all sorts of things. You don't want this thing, and then your memory's impaired to boot. And matter of fact, advanced dementia sometimes is called diabetes type 3. Yeah, I've been to see that in literature. Diabetes type 3, advanced dementia. That's how important they think and destructive that insulin is to your memory, because that's type 2 diabetes, high insulin in the blood. And foods to avoid fat, salt, and sugar. If you go to a fast food restaurant, what do you think they're doing? They're rotating fat, salt, and sugar. Any restaurant. That's because they taste good. Food's a drug. Food's a drug. So I'm writing a book right now. It's essentially finished, Psychology of Eating. And it's important because food is a drug. We have to realize the cue when we look at it. All of a sudden, dopamine gets secreted, we feel great, and we'll eat anything because they gave us permission ourselves to do it. Watch out for that. Fish has a lot of omega-3 in it. You can take it as flaxseed or as a pill or a capsule or eating fish. And I teach that in my book. I'm not totally against eating meat. I'm about, say, 80% of the time don't eat meat in the flexitarian diet, which I personally follow, because it's important to get the fats out of your life. And alcohol is toxic to the brain at all times. I mean, they say have a glass of wine. Yeah, okay, I'll go along with 2 or 3 glasses of wine a week or something like that. But I'm telling you, you drink something every day, and they even start to tell men can drink 2 glasses of wine a day. Baloney. I say baloney to that. Alcohol is a toxin. Every drink you take is a toxin. But if you're drinking 3 glasses of wine a week, you'll grow more cells in you and you destroy. But every drink does destroy some brain cells. So let them say all they want. It's a toxin, and it kills brain cells. So to keep a good brain, I wouldn't get involved with alcohol very much. Improving your working memory, the memory around you to do things every day. Think about it in terms of distraction. Distraction is the enemy to working memory. You know, you're driving down the line, down the roadway with your car, and the phone is ringing, you're talking on the phone, and now they're starting to text. The other day, I was almost run over while getting a cup of coffee at McDonald's. You notice I said coffee. And I go outside, look right, see nobody, look left, see nobody, and I went to go on, and zappo, there goes a high school kid right in front of me in the parking lot. She's never looking up. She's texting at the same time. Watch out, watch out. That's multitasking, very dangerous. I have to remind myself, I'm a surgeon. I get a stat page called the emergency room, and I'm driving in a car, and I want to call them on the phone. Believe me, I've done it on the phone while I'm driving down the road. I've stopped doing it. I pull over now. I'll pull over now. I have hooked up that I can just talk. Multitasking is very dangerous. I suggest to you, when you're driving, pay attention to what you're doing. And because I see so many accidents because of it, and a lot of them disabling accidents that you never come back from. I've seen it just too many times. Multitasking is very dangerous to working memory. And you can do it even without driving. I mean, you're doing so many things, you forget your keys, you say, I'm losing my memory. You're not losing your memory. You're doing too many things at once. I'm familiar with that. I do that because I'm not thinking about it. To remember something, it's got to register. You got to think about it. And you hear about ADHD, attention deficit disorder. Those people have decreased working memory because they're just doing so many things at once. They're paying attention to nothing. And if you want to improve your brain, try taking a whole basket full of coins, 4 different coins, and then you just pick them out and count them up. That actually they found in the study helps build the brain. So why do telephone numbers have 7 digits? I mean, there's a reason for that, because you, on the average, cannot remember more than them. That's the reason. That's the reason they stopped at 7. You want to expand your brain? Try memorizing 10 digits to improve your memory. You know, when I dictate at the hospital after surgery, there always was 6 numbers, and normally I would look at the first 3 and punch them into the code system so I could dictate it, and then I look at the next 3. I stopped doing that. Now I look at it and I memorize all 6 numbers at once. Guess what? My memory improved. I started doing that a year ago. Yeah, it was an exercise because I do it almost every day, and that's the medical record number. Now it's 6. And what I was doing is chunking it. It's called chunking into numbers of 3. But now I'm chunking in numbers of 6, and I hope to expand it further to build my memory. So break numbers into groups called chunking. And remember, to build a superpower brain, we talked about education, attention to sensory expression using your 5 senses, your vision, your hearing, and improve it. You can do exercises on my website to improve your vision, to improve your hearing, and your sensation, and your balance. Memorize poetry. There's a good one. It's very interesting. My mother, as she was at memory loss, could bring out high school poetry to an extent I could not believe how anybody in high school could have memorized that much poetry. But my mother, with severe memory loss, could recite poetry for an hour at a time. My God, I never read that much poetry in my lifetime. But see, that long-term memory was spared from the short-term memory loss that you see with dementia. Very interesting. And that's been proven in studies. And attach emotions to your important memories. You put an emotion to it, you're much more likely to remember. And if it goes from the hippocampus right to the amygdala, that's the emotional part of the temporal lobe, very small area. And you put an emotion to it, you're much more likely to remember. I was in Florida recently, and I was looking for a tennis match, and out comes Philippe de Montebello. He says, "I'm Philippe de Montebello," and he was there to play me at 2 o'clock at my tennis club because a pro wasn't available in Naples. And how would I ever remember that name? Well, he tells me, for 30 years, this man was the CEO, the head of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Important person? Yeah, that's an important person. So how to encode that in my brain? You know, I repeated it a few times. I had emotional reaction to it, obviously. I never had trouble remembering that difficult name. And a real elegant individual, incidentally. And I beat him 6-2, 6-2. And he was not happy about it. That night he gave the lecture at the hotel. What a great guy he is. But for 30 years he ran that museum. And I lived 3 blocks from it when I was a kid in New York. That was very interesting, isn't it? But you see the emotion I got behind it? I'm never going to forget that. And again, read The Secret of the Non-Diet about proper eating, because fat is the enemy of the brain. Fat is the enemy of the brain. Get that absolutely straight. Use visualization to improve your memory. Visualize and encode it. Remember I said visualize it, repeat it. It's much more likely to be encoded in your brain. And I mean, your brain is like the memory in a computer. You know, you increase your RAM. You want to increase your RAM, you got to do something. It'll not happen on its own. You have to work at it. So let's go back to the brain gym a little bit. Mental exercises, read and write. Reading is, I think, a real good thing to do. And read different book every week. If you have trouble going to sleep, read a book while you're trying to go to sleep. Believe me, 10 minutes, you'll be sleeping. It causes secretion of adenosine, which is a chemical that makes you sleepy. Take music lessons, dance lessons. Remember, I do both. I take music lessons. I took dance lessons 2 years. And increase your fluid intelligence. That's new knowledge. Fluid intelligence is new knowledge. You learn something new, you're increasing your fluid intelligence. It becomes even more important as we get a day older. Increase your crystallized intelligence. That's based on old knowledge, on old knowledge. Start reading history, things in the past about the time that you were in the service. Read about that war. Improve your crystallized intelligence. And increase your curiosity. Increase your curiosity. And let's build a superpower brain. Use memory packs. You can use certain tricks we talked about in Look, Snap, and Connect. That's and certain rhymes you can use. The people that can really memorize, 1,000 numbers or something, they'll take every number and create and hook a visualization to it. That's how they remember that. But then when it comes to everyday living, you check on their working memory and immediate memory. It's no better than anybody else's. Very interesting. These great chess players, for immediate working memory, they're no any better than anybody else. It's just that they've seen so many patterns on their chessboard it's encoded in their brain in the long-term memory, and they recognize it immediately. And they've saw them many times. It's instinct. And so repeat it and deliberately practice it. Remember I told you about my website with multiple connections to the internet, but I particularly like Pogo, and I haven't really explored that much, but that'll keep you busy forever. Have novelty, variety, and challenging activities in your life. Join the club. Run for a political office. If you lose, it's a wonderful thing. You've met an awful lot of people. And I know a lawyer friend of mine, to get his practice started, he ran for office and lost. He says, greatest thing ever happened to him. I was that. He says, I shook the hand of everybody in the county, and I'm a very busy lawyer. That's instinct, isn't it? And the free radical theory of brain aging, we talked about that. Remember, we talked about the energy quotient, the oxygen, and the energy molecules that are released, the free radicals that we need to, if we eat too much, for example, we have too many free radicals to eat our brain up. And so very important for people to lose weight, take some vitamins and omega-3, for example, and all the phytochemicals from proper eating they're antioxidants. They get rid of these free radical oxygen molecules. Okay, phytochemicals are antioxidants. Vitamin E and C is helpful. Omega-3 is helpful. Fruits and vegetables, fresh and natural foods are very helpful. And again, tricks in improving your working memory. Name 20, 30 animals. How many can you get? Draw different designs for improvement of visual memory. Take up art, improves its visual and spatial memory. Expand your vocabulary. Remember I told you about, look at these websites, Memories, Wordsmith, one new word every day. They'll even email it to you. And some other sites like that. Wordsmith is a good one. And in improving your working memory, again, learn the meaning of the word, the language of the origin, the root of the word, use it in a sentence, and your vocabulary will improve. So have a habit of deliberate practice. Here's another good website, www.adultspellingbee.com. Be a champ. At any age, try to become a spelling champ or puzzle champ. Get involved with these things. It'll protect you against dementia. So intense, deliberate practice is a hallmark of memory improvement. So, in summary, really, thank you for listening to this instant discussion of memory. Isn't that a fascinating subject? It really is. And the point is the hope for all of us. We can live to be 100. We can be of sound mind. And remember what we said. The main points are what you eat, exercise, stress reduction, avoid major head injury. And I would say next, develop a purpose in life. I think a purpose in life is extremely important. I feel so lucky that I feel I have one. It'll get you out of bed and keep you active and socialize, get involved with the and look at my website. Look at the memory aspect of it. The wonderful things on there. As good a website as I could think of, and we're just at the beginning of it. We're going to keep on improving it all the time. How to keep you healthy, and with a very good mind. And that'll take a little bit of work on your part, but it'll be fun. It'll be very rewarding. And remember, and don't live into the role. Don't pay attention to people that you're missing a few words. Do something about it. Get your relative to do something about it. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope you see some of my other DVDs. They're all about wellness. I'm doing this because I love you. Thank you.